Hey guys, tonight we're journeying back to a time when the heavens above held not just wonder, but a looming, silent threat. Picture this, the gentle, unassuming English countryside, where the most exciting thing is usually a runaway sheep, or perhaps a strongly worded letter to the Times. Suddenly, out of the inky blackness of space, a spark ignites, then another, heralding an arrival that will redefine everything you thought you knew about your place in the universe. The air crackles with an unseen energy, and that quaint little village you call home? Well, let's just say its property values are about to plummet, and you probably won't survive this, at least not with your cozy notions intact. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd also love to see where you're all tuning in from tonight and what time it is for you. Drop your location and local time in the comments below. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're there, aren't you? Standing in the cool night air of the Surrey Commons, perhaps with a slightly itchy wool coat buttoned up a little too tight. The late 19th century isn't exactly known for its breathable fabrics, is it? It's a time of immense change, a world teetering on the edge of modernity. Queen Victoria is still on the throne, overseeing a vast empire, and inventions like the telephone and the automobile are just beginning to reshape society. Yet, for all this human ingenuity, the idea of true cosmic neighbors is mostly relegated to imaginative fiction or late-night philosophical musings over a glass of sherry. Your gaze, like that of so many others in those early years of a new scientific dawn, is drawn upwards. Mars, a ruddy, insistent point of light, hangs in the velvet sky. You've heard the chatter, of course. The papers are full of it. Strange ejections of incandescent gas observed for consecutive nights from the red planet. Your local astronomer Ogilvy, a man whose tweed jacket smells faintly of pipe tobacco and celestial dust, is positively buzzing. You might have even bumped into him near the observatory, his spectacles perched precariously on his nose, muttering about gravitational anomalies and the sheer improbability of it all. A volcanic eruption, he'd speculated initially, on a colossal scale. Easy to dismiss when it's millions of miles away, isn't it? Just another headline for the fish and chips to be wrapped in tomorrow. Astronomers of the era debated fiercely whether Mars could support life, often fueled by what we now know were optical illusions. Remember Percival Lowell and his infamous Martian canals? He spent years, from the 1890s onwards, meticulously mapping these straight lines he believed were engineered waterways on Mars. Turns out, it was likely a combination of his own eyes' blood vessels and a very active imagination, a sort of cosmic Rorschach test. Still, it captured the public's imagination, this idea of an older, perhaps dying, Martian civilization. It made those flares from Mars a little more personal. Then, one particular evening, as you're perhaps contemplating whether a second cup of tea is strictly necessary before bed, something changes. The news comes filtering down from the observatories, a vast, rushing flame seen moving with immense velocity towards Earth. This isn't some distant academic puff of smoke anymore. This is a projectile. You feel a knot tighten in your stomach, a little fizz of apprehension. It's probably just a meteor, right? A spectacular one, certainly, but nothing to lose sleep over. After all, what are the chances? Billions to one, someone probably said down at the pub before ordering another pint of bitter. The next morning, however, the cosmic firework lands a little too close to home for comfort. You're out for an early stroll, maybe enjoying the crispness of the air when you see it. A column of smoke rising from Horsell Common. A crowd is already gathering by the time you arrive. A curious mix of local tradesmen, a few gentry out on their morning constitutional, and a gaggle of excited, noisy children. You push through the throng, a sense of dread mixing with an undeniable pull of curiosity. And there it is. Not a meteor, not a volcanic rock, it's something else. A vast cylindrical object, half buried in a deep pit its impact has gouged from the sandy soil. The ground around it is blackened and charred, smelling acridly of burnt heather and something metallic, something utterly alien. It's maybe 30 yards across, dull gray, and throbbing with an internal heat that makes the air shimmer above it. You can hear a faint, peculiar humming sound, a deep thrum that seems to vibrate right through the soles of your boots. People are chattering, speculating. "A cannonball from those Frenchies?" one fellow mutters, clearly having missed a few international relations updates. Ogilvy is there, naturally, looking pale but resolute, warning people to keep back. The heat is intense. Someone jokes it's a new type of oven, perfect for a very, very large Sunday roast. Nervous laughter ripples through the crowd, but the object remains still, silent, save for that unnerving hum and a faint rhythmic clanking from within, like someone very patiently unscrewing something incredibly important. Historians still argue whether any significant military preparations were even considered by the British government in those initial hours of bewildered reports filtering in from Woking. The idea was so preposterous, so beyond the realm of anything experienced, that inaction seemed the most logical, if ultimately flawed, response. You stand there with the others, on the lip of this strange, sandy crater, staring at the impossible thing that has fallen from the sky. A peculiar grating sound begins from the cylinder's end, a slow, deliberate unscrewing. The sun climbs higher, baking the common, but all eyes are fixed on the enigma, a growing sense of foreboding starting to curdle the initial excitement into something far more primal. The top of the cylinder is slowly rotating, and you realize with a sudden, cold certainty that whatever is inside is about to come out. The metallic grinding intensifies, each rasp and shriek of tortured metal grating on your nerves, making the hairs on your arms stand up despite the growing warmth of the day. You find yourself unconsciously holding your breath, a tight band around your chest. The crowd, which had been a murmur of speculation, has fallen into a hush, an anxious silence broken only by the occasional nervous cough or the whimper of a dog pulling at its leash, sensing something deeply wrong. Remember that hum, that deep thrum from the cylinder? It seems to be growing louder, a resonant frequency that vibrates in your teeth. You edge a little closer, morbid curiosity wrestling with a primal urge to turn and bolt. Others do the same, drawn in like moths to a very ominous flame. Ogilvy, the astronomer, is trying to maintain some semblance of order, his voice a little shakier now as he calls out, "Keep back, I say, we don't know what it is!" But his words are mostly lost, swallowed by the collective focus on that slowly, relentlessly unscrewing end cap. The metal, you notice, isn't quite like anything you've ever seen. It's a dull, almost oily gray, and where the sun catches it, there's a strange, non-reflective quality, as if it absorbs light. Then, with a final protracted screech, the circular end of the cylinder, a massive disc of metal, falls away with a dull clang, crashing into the sandy soil at the bottom of the pit. A puff of steam, or perhaps some kind of vapor, hisses out, momentarily obscuring the dark opening. It smells weird. Not foul exactly, but utterly alien. A mix of singed metal and something vaguely organic, like disturbed earth from a place that has never known rain. It's a scent that will, in the coming days, become synonymous with absolute terror. From the blackness within, something begins to emerge. It's slow, hesitant almost, as if whatever is inside is acclimatizing to this new, strange world. You crane your neck, jostling for a better view. First, a rounded, brownish, leathery mass, like a colossal slug-like head, glistening as if wet. It's bigger than a bear, and from it, two enormous luminous eyes fix upon the assembled crowd. They are intense, passionless, and you feel a shiver crawl down your spine as those alien optics seem to assess, to catalog. There's a palpable sense of intelligence there, cold and ancient. It's the kind of gaze that makes you feel like an insect under a microscope. Then, dripping saliva or some similar viscous fluid, a set of V-shaped beak-like lips quiver, and a strange pulsating organ, something like a gorgon's head with writhing tentacular appendages, is revealed. This is the Martian, a creature of nightmare made real. It moves with a heavy, ungainly effort in Earth's stronger gravity, dragging its immense oily bulk out of the cylinder. There's a faint wheezing sound accompanying its movements, as if breathing our atmosphere is a struggle. You realize with a jolt, this isn't just an organism, this is an intelligence, a being from another world, and it is looking directly at you. For a moment, there's a stunned, absolute silence. The kind of silence that feels like the world itself is holding its breath. People are frozen, a tableau of gaping mouths and wide, unblinking eyes. The sheer impossibility of it all is overwhelming. A delegate, carrying a small white flag, a hastily improvised gesture of peace, perhaps a napkin tied to a walking stick, takes a hesitant step forward. A noble, if hopelessly naive, gesture. He's trying to communicate the most basic human instinct when faced with the unknown. We mean no harm. The Martian, however, has other ideas. From the depths of the pit around the cylinder, a series of metallic clicks and whirs can be heard. And then, slender, whip-like metallic tentacles snake out from the darkness, followed by a polished, articulated rod. This rod rises, a complex assembly of shining metal, and atop it, a sort of box or camera-like device swivels, pointing directly at the approaching delegate, then slowly, deliberately, panning across the crowd. You see a flicker, a brief, intense flash from within this device. And then it happens. A blinding flash of intense light, so bright it makes you cry out and shield your eyes, followed instantly by a searing, invisible wave of heat. There's no sound, no explosion, just this silent, all-consuming energy. The man with the white flag vanishes in a puff of smoke and incinerated cloth. Trees on the edge of the common burst into flame as if doused in petrol and set alight. The ground where the front ranks of the crowd had stood is now a blackened, smoking ruin. Screams, pure, unadulterated screams of agony and terror erupt as people catch fire, their clothes igniting, their skin blistering. It's chaos, pure, unthinking animal panic. The heat ray, as you'll later come to know it, sweeps across the common, an invisible scythe of destruction. It's not an explosion, it's an intense, focused beam that sets combustible material alight with terrifying speed. You see a flash, and whatever it touches is instantly consumed by fire. You turn, stumbling, desperate to escape. The smell of burning grass, burning trees, and sickeningly burning flesh fills your nostrils, choking you. The jovial, curious atmosphere of moments before has been utterly obliterated, replaced by the primal, desperate need to survive. People are pushing, shoving, trampling one another in their haste to get away from the pit and the silent, death-dealing thing that has emerged from it. You scramble up the side of the sandy depression, slipping and sliding, your heart hammering against your ribs like a trapped bird. You risk a glance back. The Martian, or rather, the complex war machine it's clearly operating from within the pit, is methodically, unemotionally clearing the area. Another flash, and a group of fleeing figures simply ceases to exist, their screams cut short. The fact that H.G. Wells conceived of such a devastating directed energy weapon in 1898 is astonishing. Beam weapons were purely the stuff of speculative fantasy. At the time, the most advanced military technology revolved around explosives and machine guns. Wells's heat ray predates serious scientific research into lasers or particle beams by decades. Some fringe theorists have even suggested, rather amusingly, that Wells must have had some precognitive glimpse of future warfare, though it's far more likely a testament to his incredible imagination. You don't care about scientific precedents right now. You're just running, lungs burning, a silent scream trapped in your throat. The ordinary commons of Surrey have become a fiery gateway to hell. The debate about whether Mars was inhabited has just been settled in the most brutal way imaginable. You keep running, away from the crackle of flames and the thin, high-pitched wails of the dying. The image of those luminous, dispassionate eyes burned into your memory. The age of wonder is over. The age of terror has begun. You don't stop running, not really. Not until your lungs feel like they're shredding from the inside out, and your legs are trembling almost uncontrollably. The sounds of the heat ray's devastating work fade slightly as you put distance between yourself and Horsell Common, but the acrid smell of burning lingers in the air, a constant nauseating reminder. You find yourself with a small, terrified knot of other survivors, faces pale and smeared with soot, eyes wide with an unspeakable horror they can't yet process. Someone is sobbing hysterically, a raw, ragged sound. Another man is muttering prayers, his voice cracking. Your first instinct after the initial wave of pure, unadulterated terror is to warn someone, anyone, to raise the alarm. This isn't just a localized disaster, a freak accident. This is an invasion. The word itself feels ludicrous, something ripped from the pages of the penny dreadfuls you'd sometimes skim at the newsagent. But the charred ground, the incinerated bodies, the memory of that cold, analytical gaze from the pit, they're all too real. You stumble towards Woking, your hometown, a place that just hours ago felt like the epitome of peaceful, mundane English life. Now, it's a scene of growing confusion and dawning panic. People are out in the streets, drawn by the smoke and the distant, unsettling sounds. Rumors are spreading like wildfire, each more outlandish than the last. A munitions factory exploded! Anarchists, I tell you, anarchists with a new kind of bomb! You try to explain what you saw, the cylinder, the creature, the heat beam, but your words come out garbled, breathless, tinged with hysteria. Some look at you with pity, others with suspicion, as if you've had a bit too much sun, or perhaps one too many at the local. But then, more tangible evidence arrives. A small detachment of soldiers, perhaps a dozen or so, marches smartly down the road towards the common, rifles shouldered, looking resolute. Their scarlet tunics, a proud symbol of the British Empire upon which, as the saying went, the sun never set, seem suddenly tragically inadequate against the memory of that silent, burning ray. They represent the might of Queen Victoria, the strength of an empire that controlled a quarter of the world's population. Yet, faced with an enemy from the stars, their .303 Lee Metford rifles are little more than pea shooters. You try to warn their officer, a young lieutenant with a neatly trimmed mustache and an air of calm authority, but he politely dismisses your frantic babbling. "We'll soon sort it out, my good man," he says, with a confidence that makes your stomach churn. You know, with a dreadful certainty, what awaits them. And then, confirmation. More eyewitnesses, equally terrified and disheveled, come fleeing from the common, their stories corroborating yours. The disbelief on the faces of the townsfolk begins to morph into a dawning, sickening realization. The truth is too monstrous to ignore. A palpable sense of dread starts to grip Woking. Shopkeepers hastily pull down their shutters, families usher their children indoors. The everyday sounds of the town, the clatter of hooves, the cry of street vendors, the distant whistle of a train, are being replaced by an ominous, spreading silence. You watch from a relatively safe distance as a second cylinder, then a third, scream down from the sky, trailing fire and smoke, impacting further out on the commons. It's clear this isn't an isolated incident. This is a coordinated landing. Each impact sends a fresh wave of terror through the onlookers. They're here. They're really here, Lee. Historians still argue whether the Martians' initial slow deployment, focusing on establishing a perimeter around their first cylinder, was a strategic mistake or a deliberate psychological tactic to sow maximum confusion before a wider assault. It certainly allowed rumors and fear to outpace any organized response. Later that afternoon, the first Martian tripod makes its appearance, striding out of the smoke and haze surrounding the impact craters. You see it from the outskirts of Woking, a colossal three-legged machine, taller than the tallest church steeple, moving with a terrifying, swift fluidity. It's a shining metallic monster, and perched atop its towering legs is a brazen hood-like head from which the dreaded heat ray emanates. The small group of soldiers you saw earlier? They're annihilated in seconds. A distant, flickering green light, a sudden bloom of fire, and then nothing. Just silence and more smoke. Their brave, disciplined volleys of rifle fire patter harmlessly against its impervious hide. It's like children throwing stones at a battleship. The effect on Woking is instantaneous and devastating. What had been anxious preparation now explodes into full-blown panic. People pour out of their houses, clutching hastily gathered belongings, their faces masks of terror. The roads become choked with a frantic exodus. Carts, bicycles, people on foot, all fleeing the advancing horror. The very fabric of society seems to unravel before your eyes. That carefully constructed Victorian order, with its class distinctions and rigid social rules, evaporates in the face of an existential threat. It's every man, woman, and child for themselves. You join the throng, a nameless face in a river of terrified humanity. The Martian tripods are systematically advancing, and the heat ray is doing its terrible work. Houses erupt in flames, trees explode, The air is filled with the continuous, terrifying hiss and crackle of the ray. You hear the sound of distant artillery, big guns being brought up from Aldershot, the main military base nearby. For a fleeting moment, there's a flicker of hope. Surely our cannons, our best military minds can stop these things. But the hope is short-lived. The rhythmic booming of the guns is answered by brighter, more frequent flashes from the tripods, and then an eerie silence from the direction of the artillery emplacement. It's a massacre. A quirky, though grim tidbit from this period's speculative fiction often involved Martians being defeated by mundane earthly things, like getting common colds, foreshadowing perhaps. Wells, however, wasn't offering such easy outs. Not yet. He was showing humanity's technological pride being utterly, comprehensively humbled. You trudge on, amidst the screaming and the chaos, the red glow of burning Woking illuminating the nightmarish scene behind you. The town you knew, the familiar streets, the church where you were perhaps baptized, the pub where you shared a pint with friends, all are being erased, consumed by an alien fire. You look back one last time and see the towering silhouette of a tripod, momentarily framed against the inferno, a monstrous, implacable god of destruction. There is no fighting this, not yet. There is only running. The initial encounter is over. The full-scale invasion has begun. And you, my friend, are right in the thick of it, just trying to put one foot in front of the other, to stay alive for one more precious, terrifying minute. The roads are a barely moving river of human misery. You're swept along in the tide of refugees, a chaotic jumble of overloaded carts, barrows piled high with salvaged possessions, and weary, stumbling people. The air is thick with dust, the cries of frightened children, and the distant, ominous hum of the Martians, a sound that seems to permanently vibrate in your bones now, a constant reminder of their implacable advance. Remember that first glimpse of the Martian itself, oily and immense. Now, your fear is directed at their towering machines, mechanical spiders stalking the English countryside. Your immediate goal, shared by thousands, is the River Thames. The thought process is simple, almost primal. Water is a barrier. Maybe these metal behemoths can't cross it. Maybe there will be boats, safety, a chance to regroup on the other side. It's a desperate hope, clutched at like a drowning man grasping for a branch. You are part of what would later be called the Great Panic, a mass displacement of people unprecedented in British history up to that point. Think of it as the worst bank holiday traffic imaginable, but instead of heading to Brighton for some sun, you're fleeing for your life from heat ray-wielding tripods. A tad more stressful, wouldn't you say? The journey is brutal. Food is scarce, water even more so. Any semblance of order is broken down. You see desperation in people's eyes, a raw, survivalist instinct emerging. A well-dressed gentleman who just days ago might have sneered at your worn boots now shoves past you, his fine clothes torn, his face a mask of fear, fighting for a space on an overburdened wagon. The veneer of civilization is proving to be distressingly thin. As you near Weybridge, the congestion worsens. The town itself is a bottleneck. The bridge over the River Wey a critical choke point. And it's here, in this idyllic riverside setting, that you witness another horrifying display of Martian power. Military units are attempting to make a stand. You see soldiers digging in, artillery pieces being hastily positioned, a brave but ultimately futile effort to defend the crossing. They've learned a little from the Woking massacre. They're more dispersed, trying to use the terrain to their advantage. Then the tripods arrive. Not one, but 5 of them, moving in a coordinated fashion, striding through the trees and across the fields as if they were merely taking a stroll. They wade into the River Wey, their metallic legs churning the water into froth. They seem almost contemptuous of the human resistance. The artillery opens up, shells bursting around the Martian machines. For a moment, a cheer goes up from the watching refugees. One of the tripods stumbles, as a shell finds its mark on a leg joint. A fragile, fleeting hope blooms in your chest, but it's extinguished almost immediately. The other tripods concentrate their fire. The heat rays lash out, silent and deadly. The artillery crews are wiped out, their guns melted into slag. Buildings in Weybridge erupt into flames. The scene becomes a horrifying spectacle of fire, smoke, and screams. One of the tripods, the one that had been hit, employs a new, even more terrifying weapon: the black smoke. Canisters are launched from the machine, arcing high into the air before bursting, releasing dense, oily black clouds that drift down over the town and the fleeing crowds. It's not like normal smoke. It's heavier, clinging to the ground, and it has a pungent chemical odor that stings your eyes and burns your throat. People caught in it begin to choke, to claw at their faces, before collapsing, their bodies convulsing. It's a chemical weapon, ruthlessly effective, designed to kill indiscriminately. You see a mother trying to shield her child, both consumed by the choking fumes. The horror is relentless. Historians still argue whether the black smoke was a chlorine-based gas or some other, more advanced Martian chemical agent. Its depiction in the novel was remarkably prescient, as large-scale chemical warfare would horrify the world less than 2 decades later during World War I, starting with the German use of chlorine gas at the Second Battle of Ypres in 1915. Wells, it seems, had a chilling knack for anticipating the darker turns of human and alien conflict. You recoil in horror from the advancing black clouds, turning to flee further, anywhere away from this new insidious death. The bridge is now a scene of utter chaos, people trampling each other in their desperate attempts to cross, to escape the smoke and the ever-present heat rays. You choose to follow the riverbank, hoping to find another crossing, or perhaps a boat. The tripods are wading directly into the Thames now, their great height allowing them to traverse even this mighty river with ease. So much for the water barrier. The sheer scale of their machinery is mind-boggling. Each leg must be over 100 feet long, and their movements, though mechanical, have a disturbingly lifelike quality, like colossal metallic insects. A rather quirky theory proposed by some enthusiasts is that Wells might have been inspired by the then newly constructed Forth Bridge in Scotland, with its immense cantilevered structures, for the design of his tripods. While there's no direct evidence, the towering skeletal aesthetic does have a certain resemblance, doesn't it? You keep moving, pushing through the panicked throngs, past discarded belongings, overturned carts, and occasionally, the still forms of those who didn't make it. The Martians seem unstoppable, their technology far beyond anything humanity can muster. They are not just conquering, they are systematically, terrifyingly clearing the land. Weybridge is burning, a funeral pyre for the hope that human ingenuity could somehow prevail. Ahead lies London, the largest city in the world, the heart of the British Empire. If Weybridge is falling, what chance does London have? The thought is almost too bleak to contemplate, yet it propels you forward, deeper into the growing twilight, deeper into a world rapidly succumbing to alien domination. The sounds of destruction follow you, a terrifying symphony conducted by unseen, tentacled hands. As you press on, your own desperate journey towards London becomes secondary for a while, as the narrative thread shifts, almost like a camera panning away, to follow another soul caught in this escalating nightmare. Your brother. He's a medical student in London, a young man of science and reason, and through his eyes, you will witness the creeping dread and eventual implosion of the world's greatest city. Remember how Woking and Weybridge descended into chaos? Imagine that on an infinitely larger, more densely packed scale. News of the Martian landings has by now reached London, but it's distorted, confused, and initially met with a typical metropolitan blend of fleeting interest and cynical dismissal. Strange tales from the Surrey savages. That's probably how some city folk might have jokingly referred to their country cousins. A bit like today, when a truly bizarre headline from a remote place might offer a moment's amusement before you scroll on. The newspapers are cautious, printing brief, almost hesitant reports. Disturbances near Woking, unconfirmed accounts of hostilities. There's an official reluctance to cause a panic, a very British desire to keep a stiff upper lip, even if that lip is starting to tremble uncontrollably. But the sheer volume of refugees starting to trickle, then pour into the capital, cannot be ignored. They bring with them first-hand accounts of burning towns, invulnerable machines, and the terrifying heat ray. Your brother, walking home from his studies, perhaps dissecting a frog or pondering the intricacies of the human nervous system only hours before, now sees the first signs of this creeping dread. The agitated crowds around the railway stations, the unusually purposeful movement of troops through the streets, the anxious knots of people gathering around anyone with a newspaper or a fresh piece of gossip. He, like many Londoners, initially struggles to grasp the reality. Martians? Giant walking machines? It sounds like something out of a particularly lurid serial in the Strand magazine. The official pronouncements are still vaguely reassuring, designed to quell anxiety. The situation is in hand. Military forces are engaging the enemy. But the undertone of fear is becoming harder to suppress. Then, more concrete news filters through. Chertsey and Walton are in flames. Shepperton has been annihilated. The Martians are relentlessly advancing up the Thames Valley. The true turning point for London, the moment when uneasy apprehension explodes into full-blown panic, is when the first Martians are actually sighted from the city's outskirts. Perhaps from Putney Hill or Richmond. Imagine standing there, looking out over the sprawling metropolis, and seeing, silhouetted against the distant sky, the unmistakable, horrifying form of a Martian tripod, then another, and another. The distant flashes of the heat ray become visible, painting the horizon with strokes of destruction. The news spreads through London like a shockwave. This isn't just happening out there in the countryside anymore. This is on London's doorstep. The government, which had been trying to manage the flow of information, loses control. The newspapers, casting aside restraint, print lurid headlines. Martians advance on London. The end of the world at hand. The effect is electric. The exodus begins. What you experienced on the roads from Woking is now replayed on a colossal scale. Millions of people simultaneously trying to flee the city. The railway stations are scenes of absolute pandemonium. Crowds fight and claw their way onto any available train, regardless of its destination, cramming into carriages, onto roofs, clinging to the sides. Many trains don't even leave. The lines are soon cut by the advancing Martians or blocked by wreckage. The quirky fact that the London Underground, parts of which were operational since 1863, isn't really presented as a viable mass escape route in the novel is interesting. Perhaps its tunnels felt too much like potential traps. The streets become impassable rivers of humanity, a churning mass of terror-stricken people and overloaded vehicles. Families are separated in the crush. Fortunes are abandoned. The intricate clockwork society of London breaks down completely. There is no law, no order, only the desperate stampede to escape. Your brother, caught in this maelstrom, is pushed and pulled by the crowd, witnessing firsthand the raw, ugly side of human nature when faced with annihilation. He sees people trampled, robbed, fights breaking out over a loaf of bread or a space in a cart. Historians still argue whether a more orderly evacuation of London could have been achieved with better planning and communication. Given the unprecedented nature of the threat and the speed of the Martian advance, it's a difficult question to answer. The truth is, no one had ever conceived of, let alone planned for, an enemy descending from the stars. Contemporary accounts of natural disasters from the period, like the 1883 eruption of Krakatoa, which sent shockwaves and tsunamis across the globe, were perhaps the closest parallel, but even they didn't involve an intelligent, hostile aggressor. Your brother eventually makes his way towards the coast, hoping to find a boat, any boat that can take him away from this doomed island. He witnesses looting, despair, and occasionally small acts of courage or kindness that shine briefly in the overwhelming darkness. The air is filled with the sound of distant explosions, the red glow of fires in the sky, and the incessant, terrifying shrieking of the Martians' "Ulla, Ulla" war cry, a sound that cuts through the din and chills the blood. He sees the Houses of Parliament, Big Ben, all the iconic symbols of British power, standing silent and vulnerable against the approaching doom. The city, just days before the vibrant heart of a global empire, is becoming a ghost town, emptied by fear, soon to be consumed by the alien invaders. He manages, through sheer luck and desperation, to get onto a packed steamer heading out into the English Channel, leaving behind a scene of unimaginable chaos and destruction. The view from the departing ship is of London under a pall of smoke, with the towering silhouettes of the tripods striding through its streets, the flash of their heat rays like malevolent stars. The mighty city, For so long, the center of the known world is falling. And your brother, a tiny, insignificant speck on a fleeing ship, can only watch in horror, wondering if there is any sanctuary left on Earth. As your brother and countless others flee across the waters of the English Channel, desperate to escape the inferno that London has become, you find yourself witnessing a moment of astonishing, albeit tragic, bravery. The narrative pulls you towards the Essex coast, near the mouth of the River Blackwater. The Martians, relentless in their advance, are not content with merely subjugating the land. They are extending their reach to the sea, perhaps seeking to cut off all escape routes or to establish coastal footholds. Remember those early, almost dismissive reports from astronomers? Now, the full, terrible scale of their ambition is becoming clear. Out in the estuary, a small flotilla of ships is attempting to shepherd the refugee vessels, steamers, sailboats, anything that can float, away from the coast. And among them, one ship stands out, HMS Thunderchild. She's an ironclad torpedo ram, not the newest or most powerful vessel in Her Majesty's Navy, but sturdy, heavily armed, and crewed by men who embody the bulldog spirit of the Royal Navy. She's a relic of an earlier era of naval design, with her prominent ram bow designed for sinking enemy ships by physically striking them, a tactic that was already becoming obsolete by the 1890s as naval gunnery improved. This slightly archaic feature, however, might just have a surprising role to play. You see them first, 3 Martian tripods, wading out into the shallows from the Essex marshes, their metallic forms glistening in the hazy sunlight. They are making for the crowded shipping lanes, their intent clearly to wreak havoc among the vulnerable fleeing vessels. The sight of them sends a fresh wave of panic through the refugee ships. Their heat rays can easily turn wooden decks and canvas sails into blazing pyres. The steamers frantically try to build up speed, their funnels belching black smoke, while sailing ships struggle to catch the wind, their crews shouting and scrambling. It is then that Thunderchild steams into action. She's outgunned and, in terms of sheer height and reach, ludicrously outmatched. Her cannons, while powerful by human standards, seem like pop guns against the impervious hides of the tripods. But she doesn't hesitate. She turns deliberately towards the approaching Martians, her ensign flying defiantly, a plume of coal smoke billowing from her funnel as her engines strain. You can almost hear the throb of her machinery, a heartbeat of defiance against the alien hum. The Martians, perhaps surprised by this audacious challenge from such a comparatively puny adversary, pause in their advance. One of them raises its hood-like head and a heat ray lashes out. It misses Thunderchild, striking the water nearby, sending up a huge cloud of steam and superheated spray. The ironclad shudders but presses on, her forward guns barking, spitting flame and shells at the nearest tripod. The shells impact. You see them burst against the metallic leg, but they seem to do little more than scratch the surface, like pebbles thrown against a cliff. This is the age of dreadnoughts just dawning. HMS Dreadnought itself, which would revolutionize naval warfare, wouldn't be launched until 1906. So Thunderchild represents a navy on the cusp of immense technological change, yet still relying on brute force and courage. Historians still argue whether any conventional naval tactics of the time could have possibly countered the Martian tripod's mobility and firepower. Most conclude it was a hopeless endeavor from a purely military standpoint. But Thunderchild is fighting for more than just military victory. She's fighting for time, for the lives of the thousands cowering on the fleeing ships. She maneuvers with surprising agility for a vessel of her size, her captain clearly a man of immense skill and courage. Another heat ray blast, and this time it's a near miss, scorching her paintwork and sending splinters flying from her deck. Still, she comes on. She closes the distance, steaming directly at one of the tripods. The Martian seems almost disdainful, as if swatting a bothersome fly. It turns its heat ray full upon the ironclad. You see sections of her superstructure begin to glow cherry red, then melt and twist. Flames erupt on her deck, but incredibly, impossibly, she keeps coming. Her guns are still firing, point blank now into the Martian's body. And then, in a moment of sublime suicidal bravery, Thunderchild executes her ship's namesake purpose. Ignoring the devastating heat ray, her ram bow, that anachronistic spike of naval architecture, plows directly into the legs of the nearest tripod. There's a horrendous screech of tearing metal, a colossal impact that makes the very air shudder. The tripod, its leg joint shattered, stumbles, tilts, and then crashes spectacularly into the sea, sending up a colossal waterspout. One down! A cheer, a desperate, ragged cheer goes up from the refugee ships. But the victory is fleeting and terribly costly. Thunderchild is crippled, burning fiercely, her brave charge her last. The two remaining tripods converge on her. Their heat rays, like vengeful fire from the gods, incinerate the wounded ship. She lists, glows, and then, with a final defiant belch of steam and smoke, she capsizes and sinks, her guns silenced, her battle over. A quirky but rather poignant image sometimes circulated shows a small model of Thunderchild proudly displayed by maritime history enthusiasts, a testament to fictional bravery inspiring real-world admiration. The sacrifice, however, is not entirely in vain. The brief, vicious engagement has bought precious minutes. Many of the refugee ships have managed to gain distance, scattering further out to sea. The Martians, perhaps momentarily distracted or even surprised by the ferocity of the attack, are slower to pursue. Your brother's ship, among others, manages to slip away into the haze and confusion. You watch from afar as the smoke from Thunderchild's funeral pyre mingles with the smoke from the burning land. It's a moment of profound sorrow, but also a spark of fierce pride. Humanity might be outmatched, out-teched and facing extinction, but it can still fight back with courage and self-sacrifice. The fall of London was a blow to the heart of the Empire, but the stand of Thunderchild shows that the spirit at least is not yet extinguished. Yet the reality is grim. 2 more tripods still stand, and the waters offer no true sanctuary, only a temporary reprieve. The taste of ash and salt water is on your lips as you continue your own journey, haunted by the image of that valiant, doomed ironclad. The heroic, tragic sacrifice of HMS Thunderchild fades into the smoke and mist, a poignant memory against a backdrop of ever-widening devastation. You find yourself once more on land, navigating a world that is rapidly becoming unrecognizable. The organized flight, chaotic as it was, has fractured. Small groups and lone individuals now wander the despoiled countryside, an eerie silence replacing the clamor of the initial panic. Remember the choked roads towards Weybridge, teeming with desperate life? Now those same roads are often deserted, littered with abandoned carts, personal belongings, and occasionally the stark, still forms of those who succumb to the black smoke or the heat ray. You are trudging through a landscape that seems to be actively dying. The vibrant green of the English summer is giving way to a strange reddish-brown hue. It's the redweed, a Martian plant that grows with astonishing speed, choking out native vegetation, spreading across fields, climbing walls, and even beginning to dam rivers with its thick, fleshy tendrils. It gives off a faint, metallic scent, and the water in streams and ponds it touches becomes tinted and unpalatable. The world is literally being terraformed, reshaped into something more hospitable for the invaders and deeply alien to you. This biological warfare, alongside the mechanical, is transforming your home into a Martian colony. Food is your constant gnawing preoccupation. Shops have been looted bare, farms abandoned. You learn to scavenge, to look for scraps, to take risks for a handful of potatoes from an overgrown garden or a stale loaf of bread in a deserted bakery. This is a far cry from worrying about whether your tea was brewed strong enough, isn't it? The rules of society have evaporated. Survival is the only law. You eye other survivors with suspicion. Are they a threat? Do they have food you need? The desperation is a palpable thing, a heavy cloak you wear day and night. It's during this period of desolate wandering that you encounter the curate. You find him sitting by the roadside, amidst the ruins of a small village, his clerical collar askew, his eyes wide and staring with a wild, unfocused light. He was a man of God, a shepherd to his flock. Now his flock is scattered or dead, his church is likely a smoldering ruin, and his faith is clearly cracking under the immense strain of a catastrophe that defies all theological explanation. How do you reconcile an all-powerful, benevolent God with heat rays and soul-destroying black smoke? He latches onto you, perhaps seeing in you a fellow survivor, a sounding board for his unraveling thoughts. At first, his company is a relief, a human voice in the oppressive silence. But his conversation quickly becomes unsettling. He rambles, switching from pronouncements of divine judgment, "This is the wrath of God, we are sinners, and this is our penance," to moments of whimpering terror, then back to fiery, almost manic declarations of humanity's wickedness. He seems to see the Martians not just as invaders, but as agents of a divine, if terrifyingly brutal plan. His presence becomes a burden. He is loud when caution demands silence, reckless when survival dictates prudence. He seems to have lost all sense of self-preservation, believing perhaps that he is either already damned or somehow protected by a divine providence that has clearly overlooked everyone else. You try to reason with him, to urge quiet, to keep moving, but he is increasingly lost in his own spiritual torment. This encounter with the curate highlights a profound crisis of faith and meaning. The Victorian era, for all its scientific advancements, was still deeply religious for many. The Church of England held a central place in society. The idea of such an apocalyptic event, devoid of any recognizable divine narrative from the Bible, was profoundly disturbing. Historians still argue whether the profound shock of events like World War I, which came later, was amplified by a similar societal questioning of established religious and moral certainties, much like what the curate embodies on a personal level. You and the curate travel together for a time, a strange, mismatched pair in a hostile world. You are focused on the practicalities of survival, finding food, seeking shelter, avoiding Martian patrols. He is lost in theological despair and increasingly erratic pronouncements. There's a grim, almost comical irony to your situation. Imagine trying to sneak past a foraging Martian machine while your companion is loudly declaiming sections of the Book of Revelation. Not exactly conducive to a long life. The desolation is profound. You pass through towns and villages that are utterly silent, eerily empty, as if the population simply vanished. Sometimes you see the tripods in the distance, striding across the horizon, or the sinister glint of a handling machine, smaller, multi-appendaged Martian constructs used for various tasks, including, as you will horrifically discover, the collection of human captives. The presence of the red weed is everywhere, its rust-red carpet remaking the world in the Martian's image. One rather quirky and often overlooked detail is the psychological impact of the Martians' incessant, high-pitched hooting or wailing, "Aloo, aloo" in some editions, or the more famous "Ula, ula," described in the book. It wasn't just a battle cry, it was a constant auditory assault, a sound designed to unnerve and demoralize, an alien soundscape overlaying the familiar sounds of Earth. Think of it as the galaxy's worst Vuvuzela concert playing 24/7. You can imagine how that would wear down anyone's sanity. You try to maintain a grip on your own, but it's hard. The constant fear, the hunger, the destruction, and now the company of a man whose mind is visibly crumbling, it's a heavy toll. You are walking through the ruins of your world, a ghost in a landscape transformed by an indifferent, technologically superior foe. The initial shock has passed, replaced by a grinding, day-to-day struggle for existence in a world where humanity is no longer the dominant species. And as you journey deeper into this desolate, red-tinged nightmare, the darkest days are still ahead. Your uneasy companionship with the increasingly unhinged curate leads you by a grim twist of fate to what will become your prison and your most terrifyingly intimate encounter with the Martians. Driven by hunger and the need for shelter from a drenching rainstorm, a mundane, earthly inconvenience that feels almost absurd amidst the cosmic horror. You seek refuge in a ruined, deserted house in a suburban area, perhaps Sheen or Mortlake, close to the advancing Martian front. The house is partly demolished, a testament to some earlier heat ray sweep or artillery strike, but one section, a scullery and coal cellar, remains precariously intact. Remember that feeling of dread you had on Horsell Common, watching the cylinder unscrew? Prepare for that feeling to be amplified 1,000-fold, sustained for days on end. No sooner have you both huddled inside, cold, wet, and miserable, than the earth outside groans and shudders with a colossal impact. A fifth Martian cylinder, hurtling down from the sky with that now sickeningly familiar roar, crashes virtually on top of your hiding place. The house groans, timbers snap, and a rain of plaster and debris cascades down. You are plunged into darkness, deafened by the impact, certain that this is the end. When the dust settles, you realize you are not crushed, but trapped. The cylinder's impact has brought down the rest of the house around your small refuge, effectively burying you alive next to the newly arrived alien war machine. The small, grimy window of the scullery, your only peephole to the outside world, now looks directly into the pit created by the cylinder's impact. And for the next 15 days, you and the curate will be unwilling, terrified observers of the Martians at work, closer than any human has ever been, or would ever wish to be. It's like being locked in a cupboard with a nest of very large, very intelligent, and utterly unsympathetic spiders. Good times. From your cramped, dusty vantage point, you witness the cylinder unscrewing, that same laborious, grating sound that first heralded the arrival on Horsell Common. But this time, you see the process intimately. You see the Martians emerge, those same repulsive, leathery bodies, their oversized heads with the huge, passionless eyes, their tentacular hands working with a strange, deliberate clumsiness in Earth's gravity. You see them assembling their fighting machines, the towering tripods, from components carried within the cylinder. Giant metallic limbs, complex joints, the gleaming casing of the hood, all pieced together with an alien industry that is both fascinating and horrifying to behold. The sounds are inescapable, the metallic clang and scrape of their work, the strange, fluting, communicative sighing and hooting between them, and the ever-present thrum of their machinery. And then there's the curate. His already fragile sanity begins to completely disintegrate under the strain of this enforced, terrifying proximity. He groans, he mutters prayers, he weeps, and he begins to talk, loudly and insistently, about food. Your meager, carefully hoarded supplies are dwindling, and his growing hunger makes him reckless and noisy. You try to silence him, to reason with him, but he is becoming lost to his own fear and delusion. His babbling threatens to give away your precarious hiding spot. You are caught in a double nightmare, the Martians outside, and the madman beside you. The tension is almost unbearable. Every creak of the ruined house, every shout from the curate, could spell discovery and a swift, fiery end. You see the Martians eating. This is perhaps the most chilling observation. They don't eat earthly food. Instead, specialized handling machines bring them captured humans, still alive. You watch, sickened to your core, as the Martians extract blood from their living victims using pipettes and inject it directly into their own veins. This is how they sustain themselves, by vampirizing humanity. This explains their relentless, systematic clearing of the land. They are harvesting. The grotesque detail that they have no digestive system as we understand it, but directly absorb nutrients from fresh living blood, is a truly horrifying element of their biology. Wells wasn't squeamish about the implications of an advanced predator. You observe their movements, their physiology. You note their struggles with Earth's stronger gravity when outside their machines, their sluggishness, their dependence on their technological constructs for mobility and war. Inside the pit, they are almost exclusively focused on their tasks, assembling equipment, feeding, seemingly oblivious to your hidden presence, provided you remain utterly silent and still. One of the more quirky and debated aspects is Wells's description of the Martians having no concept of sleep as humans understand it, though they do have periods of inactivity. This adds to their alien nature, portraying them as tireless, relentless beings. Historians still argue whether Wells was consciously trying to create creatures that were the antithesis of human frailty, or if he was simply exploring the biological necessities of an advanced but physically taxing interstellar invasion. Whatever the intent, it makes them seem even more formidable. Days blur into a nightmarish cycle of fear, hunger, thirst, and the desperate struggle to keep the curate quiet. The cramped space stinks of stale air, sweat, and fear. You ration your remaining scraps of food, a biscuit here, a piece of chocolate there, but it's not enough. The curate, his eyes glittering with a manic hunger, starts to eye your share with a desperate intensity. He begins to make noise, demanding more food, his voice rising to a dangerous pitch. A handling machine, one of the smaller, multi-limbed Martian constructs, approaches the ruined house, its metallic tentacles questing. It seems to be searching. Your heart pounds, Any sound now will betray you. The delicate balance of your hidden existence is about to be shattered, not just by the aliens outside, but by the crumbling sanity of the man trapped beside you. This claustrophobic imprisonment, this forced, terrifying intimacy with the alien invaders, is pushing you to the absolute brink of your own endurance. The days and nights in that cramped, dusty scullery become a suffocating ordeal, a relentless masterclass in terror. Through that small, grimy window, your view into the Martian pit, you become an unwilling naturalist, observing the intimate details of alien life and alien death-dealing. Remember the almost academic curiosity of Ogilvy the astronomer before the cylinder first opened? That innocent wonder is a distant, almost unbelievable memory now, replaced by a raw, visceral understanding of what it means to be prey. You watch the Martians, those slug-like leathery beings with their huge, dark, intelligent eyes. You observe the way their gorgon-like clusters of tentacles, their hands, manipulate tools and controls with a surprising deftness, despite their bulk. Their primary mode of communication seems to be a series of strange, ululating hoots and musical flute-like whistles. The ula ula, now so familiar and terrifying. It's a language you can't comprehend, but its intent, when directed at their machines or each other during a task, is clearly one of purposeful, intelligent cooperation. One of the most profoundly unsettling discoveries, as mentioned, is their method of sustenance. You see the handling machines, those spider-like auxiliary robots, regularly bringing human captives to the pit. These poor souls are often still alive, sometimes dazed, sometimes struggling feebly. The Martians then perform a horrifying procedure. They directly transfuse the fresh, living blood of their human victims into their own veins. It's a ghastly, clinical process, devoid of malice as you'd understand it, yet utterly monstrous. They are, in essence, colossal, intelligent parasites. They are farming humanity. Wells was writing at a time when theories of evolution and the struggle for existence were still relatively new and hotly debated, thanks to Darwin. His depiction of the Martians as an older, more intellectually evolved species that had perhaps exhausted its own world and saw Earth merely as a resource taps directly into these anxieties. The Martians are, from their perspective, simply doing what countless species, including humans, do, exploiting a less developed life form for their own survival. It's a chillingly detached viewpoint. You probably thought the worst thing about a dinner party was dry conversation. For these poor captives, it's becoming the main course. You note their physiology in more detail now. They appear to have no internal skeleton as such, relying on a kind of muscular hydrostat system like an octopus, but on a much larger scale. Their brain seems to comprise most of their upper body, a pulsating mass under that leathery skin. They have complex ears or auditory organs, and those huge eyes, which you observe are incredibly sensitive to light and movement. What's particularly alien is their lack of any discernible digestive tract beyond the system for direct blood infusion. This fact, their apparent biological specialization towards this vampiric existence, is profoundly disturbing. Their reproduction also remains a mystery, though Wells hints that they might reproduce by budding, like some simpler earthly organisms, given their single-minded, almost drone-like focus when not engaged in warfare or feeding. It's a society stripped bare of anything recognizable as human culture, emotion, beyond perhaps a cold, predatory cunning, or art. They are intellect and appetite, encased in a physically repellent form, augmented by incredible technology. Historians still argue whether Wells intended the Martians' dependence on blood to be a metaphor for imperial exploitation, with Victorian Britain itself feeding on its colonies. It's a compelling interpretation, especially given Wells's known socialist leanings and critiques of British society. The advanced but ultimately parasitic nature of the invaders certainly lends itself to such allegorical readings. One fringe tidbit of speculation, less academic and more in the realm of pulp theorizing, has always been about what Martian diseases the invaders might have been carrying, or if their own biology was so alien that terrestrial pathogens wouldn't affect them initially. While Wells focuses on their vulnerability to our microbes, the initial lack of any Martian cold or equivalent is a subtle point. It makes them seem even more clinically alien. Outside the immediate horror of the pit, you sometimes catch glimpses of the wider world through cracks in the debris. You see the relentless spread of the red weed, now coating everything in its coppery alien blanket. It seems to draw its nourishment from water, and its growth is alarmingly fast, tangling around trees, houses, and anything in its path, transforming the familiar green of Earth into a landscape more suited to Mars. The air itself tastes different, faintly metallic, and you wonder if they are deliberately altering the atmosphere too. You see the tripods striding past, sometimes alone, sometimes in groups, their heat rays ever ready. You hear the distant thud of explosions, and occasionally the nearer, terrifyingly distinct sounds of their handling machines capturing more victims. The sheer efficiency of their conquest is disheartening. There seems to be no effective resistance left, just pockets of terrified survivors hiding like you in the ruins. The days in the scullery are a blur of hushed observation, gnawing hunger, and the ever-present fear of discovery, a fear made infinitely worse by the curate's deteriorating mental state. You are watching an alien ecosystem establish itself, with humanity now demoted to the bottom of the food chain. The details you glean, their biology, their feeding habits, their strange communication, paint a picture of an enemy that is not just technologically superior, but fundamentally, existentially different. They are not here to negotiate or coexist. They are here to consume, and your tiny, precarious refuge is right next to the abattoir. The claustrophobic nightmare of your shared confinement with the curate grinds relentlessly on. Days have bled into a hellish eternity in the ruined house, marked only by the comings and goings of the Martians in the pit outside, and the slow, agonizing depletion of your hoarded food. Remember how you initially found some comfort in his company, a fellow human in the desolation? That feels like a lifetime ago. Now, he is your greatest liability, a ticking time bomb of madness and hunger. His eyes have taken on a wild, desperate sheen. His whispers have become louder, his muttering more insistent. He no longer speaks of God's wrath or humanity's sin. His ramblings are now almost entirely focused on food. He eyes the last few biscuits, the final piece of dried meat you've been carefully rationing, with a wolfish intensity that sends shivers down your spine. His clerical attire is soiled and torn, his face gaunt and grimy, but it's the unraveling of his mind that is most terrifying. He represents the breaking point, what happens when the human spirit is subjected to horrors it cannot process. You try to reason with him, to plead for silence, to explain that any undue noise will bring the Martians down upon you both. But he's largely beyond reach. He accuses you of hoarding food, of trying to starve him. He begins to shout, his voice echoing dangerously in the confined space. You clap a hand over his mouth, a desperate attempt to muffle the sounds, but he struggles, thrashing like a trapped animal. The carefully constructed silence of your hiding place is shattered. Then, the inevitable happens. A metallic slithering sound from outside, closer this time. Through a crack in the debris, you see one of the Martian handling machines, its many-jointed tentacles questing, its camera-like eye swiveling, alerted by the commotion. It's directly outside your scullery wall. Panic, cold and sharp, pierces through your exhaustion and hunger. The curate, oblivious or uncaring of the immediate danger, continues to struggle and shout. You know, with a dreadful certainty, that he will not stop. He will get you both killed. In that moment, a terrible, brutal clarity descends upon you. It's him or you. Survival, that most primal instinct, overrides everything else. In a desperate, almost convulsive action, you strike him, hard, perhaps with a piece of debris or the butt of the meat cleaver you found in the scullery and kept for just such a grim eventuality. It's a terrible choice, one that will haunt you, but in the heat of that desperate moment, it feels like the only choice. The curate slumps, silenced. Whether he's merely unconscious or worse, you don't have time to ascertain. The immediate threat is the Martian machine outside. The handling machine is now tapping, probing at the brickwork of the scullery. You can hear the faint scrape of its metallic appendages. You freeze, barely daring to breathe, pressing yourself into the darkest corner, hoping the shadows will conceal you. One of the machine's tentacles, slender and articulated like a steel snake, finds a gap in the damaged wall and begins to push through. It slides into the scullery, waving blindly, exploring. It touches the still form of the curate. For a heart-stopping moment, you think it will discover you too. But then, after what feels like an eternity, the tentacle retracts, pulling the curate's inert body out through the gap. You hear a dull thud as he is presumably dropped outside. The machine, having found food or perhaps just investigated the source of the noise, moves away. The sounds of its slithering retreat. Silence returns, a silence more profound and terrifying than before, broken only by your own ragged breathing and the frantic thumping of your heart. You are alone, truly alone now, in this dusty, blood-scented tomb. The guilt and horror of what you've done, or what you've been forced to do, washes over you. There's a grim irony that your study of the Martians' brutal methods of survival led you to employ your own. This brutal act is a direct consequence of the alien invasion, a reflection of how it's stripping away layers of civilization, reducing people to their most basic, desperate instincts. Historians still argue whether such extreme choices, made under duress, can ever be morally judged by those who have not faced similar existential threats. It's the age-old question of survival ethics, amplified to an unbearable degree. The discovery of the food store and the subsequent demise of the curate, however it happened precisely, is a known event in the historical narrative Wells crafts. The novel doesn't shy away from the grim necessities of survival. After a period of intense fear, waiting for the Martians to return for you, you realize they haven't. The handling machine took the curate and apparently considered the matter closed. Perhaps their hunger, or their focus on more lively prey, meant one inert body was sufficient for now. You remain hidden for a few more agonizing days, too terrified to move. But starvation gnaws at you. The water has run out. You know you cannot stay here. The Martian pit is still active, but there seems to be a lull in their immediate operations near your hiding place. Stealing every nerve, driven by a desperate thirst and the faintest glimmer of a will to live, you make your move. Under the cover of darkness, or perhaps a heavy rain shower that muffles sound and movement, you carefully, painstakingly, work your way out of the debris of the ruined house. You escape, crawling through the rubble, inch by agonizing inch, expecting at any moment the searing flash of a heat ray or the cold touch of a metallic tentacle. But you make it out into the alien landscape, the redweed crunching softly underfoot. You are free from your prison, but free into what? A world that is no longer yours. The taste of your narrow escape is bitter, mixed with guilt, trauma, and the profound, aching loneliness of survival. You carry the memory of the curate, a symbol of faith shattered and reason overthrown, as you stumble forward into the red-tinged unknown. This fringe survival strategy of outlasting your companion is certainly not in any self-help books. But in this new world, all bets are off. Free from the suffocating confines of the ruined house, yet still profoundly unfree, you emerge into a world eerily transformed. A landscape painted in shades of Martian red and oppressive silence. Remember the bustling, chaotic London your brother fled, teeming with terrified life? The London you now cautiously venture towards is a ghost city, a colossal mausoleum under an alien sky. The contrast is stark and deeply unsettling. As you approach the capital, the most striking feature is the pervasive silence. The normal hum of a great city, the clatter of hooves and carts, the shouts of vendors, the distant rumble of trains, the murmur of millions of voices, is gone. Replaced by what? An unnatural stillness, broken only by the occasional sigh of the wind through the crimson fronds of the red weed, the distant mournful hoot of a Martian machine. Ula! Ula! Or perhaps the scuttling of a starving dog. It's the silence of abandonment, the silence of conquest. The red weed is everywhere, a suffocating blanket. It chokes the streets, climbs the walls of familiar buildings, drapes itself over statues of forgotten heroes, and even infests the River Thames. Its fleshy tendrils forming thick, slowly waving mats on the water's surface. The once gray and grimy stone of London's architecture is now streaked and stained with this rust-colored vegetation. It's as if the planet itself is being digested and remade. You feel like an intruder in your own world, walking through a half-finished alien terrarium. The air carries a faint, coppery, metallic tang, the scent of the red weed and perhaps other atmospheric alterations wrought by the Martians. It's thin, and you find yourself breathing a little more deliberately. You navigate streets littered with debris, overturned omnibuses, abandoned personal belongings spilling from suitcases, broken shop windows displaying goods no one will ever buy. Occasionally, you see the dark, ominous stain of the black smoke on walls or roads, a reminder of the chemical death that swept through these areas. You might think all this red would be festive, like an overzealous Christmas display, but it's the color of dried blood, of decay, of alien victory. And then there are the bodies, scattered, sometimes singly, sometimes in small, tragic clusters where groups were caught by the heat ray or the black smoke. Often they are partially overgrown by the relentless redweed, as if the alien flora is trying to absorb them back into its strange ecosystem. It's a grim, constant reminder of the human cost of this invasion. You learn to step around them, a numb detachment setting in, a necessary defense mechanism against the overwhelming horror. You pass landmarks that were once symbols of imperial power and bustling city life. Trafalgar Square, empty. Nelson's Column draped in red weed, the bronze lions staring blankly at the desolation. Piccadilly Circus, its vibrant advertisements silenced, its arrow statue perhaps askew or toppled. The Strand, Fleet Street, former hives of activity, now silent canyons of ruin. It's a powerful, almost surreal experience to walk through the heart of what was, just weeks ago, the largest and arguably most important city on Earth, and find it utterly deserted by humanity, surrendered to the invaders and their strange, creeping flora. The very few signs of life you do encounter are furtive and fearful. A gaunt cat darts across an alleyway. Rats, bolder now, scavenge openly. And sometimes you see another human survivor, a fleeting glimpse of a ragged figure disappearing into the ruins, as wary of you as you are of them. Trust is a forgotten luxury. Historians still argue whether the almost complete depopulation of central London, as depicted by Wells, was plausible, or if pockets of hidden resistance or desperate holdouts would have been more likely. Wells, however, paints a picture of almost total human eradication or flight from the city's core. The Martians themselves are an occasional terrifying presence. You might see a tripod striding in the distance, its great legs navigating the ruined streets with ease. Or you hear the hum and clang of a handling machine at its work, perhaps clearing debris, or worse, gathering any remaining human captives. The infamous black smoke canisters, though not actively being deployed in your immediate vicinity, are a constant unseen threat. Their residue is everywhere. The novel is often credited with popularizing the alien invasion trope, but what Wells did so effectively was ground it in an utterly mundane, familiar setting, making the horror all the more potent. Who needed remote, imaginary kingdoms when you could have Martians stomping down Regent Street? You are searching for food, for drinkable water. Much of the river and standing water is now tainted by the red weed, and perhaps, illogically, for some sign that you are not entirely alone, that some spark of human resilience remains. The isolation is profound. You are like a Robinson Crusoe, not on a desert island, but in the deserted heart of civilization. It's a psychological ordeal as much as a physical one. This peculiar detail, the silence of the city, is something many survivors of real-world disasters and conflict zones report as one of the most unnerving aspects. The absence of expected sound creates a profound sense of wrongness. London, the vibrant, teeming, self-important capital, has become a Martian garden, a red-hued monument to their victory. And you are a tiny, insignificant creature picking your way through its ruins, your footsteps echoing unnaturally in the silent streets, a ghost in your own city, haunted by what was, and terrified of what is to come. The red world stretches out before you, seemingly endless, utterly alien. As you navigate the eerie, crimson-draped ruins of London, a flicker of human resilience, or perhaps delusion, pierces through the overwhelming despair. Emerging from the silent streets, you encounter a figure as out of place in this dead city as a cheerful song at a funeral, the artilleryman. You may vaguely remember him from earlier, perhaps a fleeting encounter during the initial flight from Woking. A soldier separated from his unit, full of bravado and a kind of desperate optimism. Well, he's back, and his spirit, unlike the curate's, hasn't shattered. It has, instead, mutated into something altogether grander and, frankly, a little bit bonkers. He's a stark contrast to the terrified, beaten-down survivors you've occasionally glimpsed. He's still got a bit of his military bearing, though his uniform is tattered and stained. He's energetic, talkative, and brimming with elaborate, fantastical plans for humanity's future. Finding him is like stumbling upon a street preacher who's decided the apocalypse is actually a brilliant career opportunity. He greets you not with fear, but with a kind of proprietary swagger, as if he's the new king of this ruined domain. He's been busy, he tells you. While you were playing hide-and-seek with Martians in a scullery, he's been thinking. He's been observing the Martians, learning their ways from a safe distance naturally, and he has a plan. Not just for survival, oh no. He's planning for humanity's resurgence, a future where mankind lives underground, biding its time, learning, and eventually rising up to reclaim the Earth. He leads you to his current headquarters, perhaps a surprisingly intact cellar or a series of connected basements. It's a chaotic mess of scavenged goods, tinned foods, tools, bedding, even a few books. He speaks with infectious enthusiasm, his words tumbling out in a torrent. He envisions a new society, an elite cadre of strong, intelligent survivors. Men like him, naturally, who will preserve human knowledge and culture in these subterranean warrens. They will dig tunnels, establish hidden communities, and train a new generation of warriors. Think of it as a very British, slightly less glamorous version of the Morlocks from Wells's earlier work, The Time Machine, but with more complaining about the quality of tinned bully beef. His plans are grandiose, and you can't help but feel wildly impractical. He talks of capturing a Martian handling machine, of studying its technology, of one day even building their own fighting machines. He describes his vision of this underground utopia, where weaklings and unnecessaries will be weeded out and a stronger, more resilient humanity will emerge. There's a definite hint of social Darwinism in his rhetoric, a sense that this catastrophe is a crucible that will forge a new, harder race of men. Remember the Martians themselves, driven by a cold, evolutionary logic? The artilleryman seems to be mirroring that, albeit with a distinctly human and slightly mad twist. He's even started some practical work, a tunnel leading from his cellar, intended to be the first artery of his subterranean kingdom. He enlists your help, and for a while you dig alongside him, the physical labor a strange kind of relief from the constant gnawing fear. But as you listen to him talk, as you observe his erratic energy and the sheer fantasy of his schemes, doubts begin to creep in. Is this resilience? Or is it a different kind of madness? A coping mechanism spun into an elaborate delusion? Historians still argue whether the artilleryman represents genuine hope and the indomitable human spirit, or if he's a satirical portrayal of jingoistic overconfidence and an inability to accept defeat. Wells often embedded social commentary in his narratives, and the artilleryman, with his talk of a new, disciplined elite, certainly offers grist for that mill. He's a character who embodies both the best and potentially the most problematic aspects of the never say die attitude. He shares his scavenged food and drink with you, a bottle of wine unearthed from a plundered cellar. For a brief period, there's a semblance of camaraderie, a shared purpose. But the artilleryman's vision, you realize, is ultimately a solitary one, or one where he is firmly in charge. He dismisses the idea of escaping England, of finding sanctuary elsewhere. This is his land, and he will fight for it, even if that fight currently consists of digging a very slow tunnel and talking a very good game. A quirky fringe theory that sometimes pops up in discussions about the War of the Worlds is that the artilleryman might have been subtly influenced by Martian psychic abilities, his grand schemes and unknowingly implanted distraction. There's no textual evidence for this, of course, but it speaks to the unsettling power the invaders have, capable of warping not just landscapes but potentially minds, too. It's more likely he's just a classic example of someone whose ambition massively outweighs their immediate capabilities. the kind of guy who'd plan a 7-course banquet with only a tin of beans and a spork. After a few days in his company, the initial spark of hope he ignited begins to fade, replaced by a weary understanding. His energy is frenetic but unproductive. His plans are magnificent but unachievable for 1 or 2 men armed with spades and wishful thinking. You see that his tunnel, after much labor, has barely progressed. His focus flits from one grand idea to another, easily distracted by the prospect of scavenging a new trinket, or delivering another rousing speech to you, his audience of one. The pull of the open, however terrifying, becomes stronger than the appeal of this claustrophobic, brandy-fueled delusion of resistance. You realize that while the artilleryman talks of fighting, he is in his own way hiding, just as you were. His fight is against despair, waged with words and dreams, but out there the Martians are real. You make your excuses, a need to see what has become of Leatherhead or some other half-hearted reason. He lets you go, perhaps already lost in his next grand strategic vision. You leave him to his subterranean kingdom building, a lonely, defiant, and ultimately rather pathetic figure amidst the ruins of a conquered world. His company was a strange interlude, a brief detour into one man's very particular apocalypse. Leaving the artilleryman to his ambitious, if somewhat deluded, tunneling project, you find yourself once again adrift in the silent, red-hued world. The brief spark of manic energy he provided has faded, and a deeper, more profound despair begins to settle over you. You've witnessed horror, endured captivity, skirted starvation, and seen humanity's finest efforts, from soldiers to warships, utterly crushed. Remember that first, almost naive sense of human superiority when the cylinder initially landed. That seems like a cruel joke now. You wander aimlessly, a ghost in a dying world. London is a vast, empty shell. The red weed continues its relentless advance, choking the life out of everything familiar. The only sounds are the wind, the occasional mournful cry of the Martians, "Ulla! Ulla!" That seems to echo from an ever-present distance, and the frantic beating of your own heart whenever a shadow moves unexpectedly. You are beyond the point of active flight, more of a rudderless raft drifting on an alien tide. Your search for food becomes more desperate, your finds scarcer. The tins the artilleryman so proudly displayed were a finite resource. You gnaw on scraps, drink tainted water when thirst becomes unbearable, and feel your strength slowly ebbing away. The psychological toll is immense. Loneliness grinds you down. The constant low-level fear, the unending vistas of destruction, the sense of utter hopelessness, it all combines to create a suffocating blanket of despair. You begin to consider the unthinkable, surrender, not to the Martians in any formal sense. How would one even do that? But a surrender of the will to live. What is the point of struggling on in this desolate, alien-dominated landscape? Every sunrise brings only a renewed awareness of your miserable, hunted existence. Every rustle in the red weed could be a handling machine. Every distant tripod silhouette is a reminder of their invincibility. You're tired, so profoundly, deeply tired. There's a chilling historical parallel here. Accounts from survivors of sieges or prolonged disasters often speak of this giving up phase, a psychological state where the sheer exhaustion and hopelessness overwhelm the instinct for self-preservation. It's a quiet, internal surrender, often more dangerous than any external threat. Your experience with the curate, who succumbed to his own internal collapse, now feels less like an aberration and more like a grim foreshadowing. You find yourself on Primrose Hill, a place that in former times offered panoramic views of a vibrant, bustling London. Now it offers a panorama of ruin, sprawling beneath you is the conquered city, shrouded in red, silent save for the occasional alien sound. And it is here, as you gaze out over the desolation, contemplating perhaps just lying down and waiting for the end, that you observe something strange. One of the Martian handling machines, typically so purposeful in its movements, is behaving erratically. It stumbles, its metallic limbs flailing for a moment before it rights itself. Then, it remains still for a long period, something you haven't seen before. Later, you see a tripod, one of the mighty fighting machines, moving slowly, almost lethargically, its usual swift, fluid stride replaced by a hesitant, clumsy gait. It fires its heat ray, but the beam seems weaker, less focused, sputtering out prematurely. What is happening? You watch. A faint, almost bu gan xiang xin, afraid to believe, flicker of something stirring within your despair. Is it possible? Could these seemingly invincible conquerors have a weakness? Could they be faltering? You see more signs. A Martian handling machine topples over and doesn't get back up. The usually incessant "Ula, ula" cries from the Martian encampment seem less frequent, more subdued, almost unwell. There's a change in the air, a subtle shift in the dynamics of this one-sided war. The red weed still chokes the land, but the masters of the weed, the Martians themselves, appear to be in some kind of distress. Historians still argue about the exact moment the tide began to turn, or rather, when the Martians' inexplicable decline became noticeable to human observers. Wells cleverly portrays this not as a dramatic human victory, but as a baffling, almost anticlimactic cessation of Martian activity. The invaders aren't being defeated by human ingenuity or firepower. They seem to be succumbing to something else entirely. The utter despair that had gripped you begins, very slowly, to recede, replaced by a tentative, fearful curiosity. You're almost afraid to hope. After all the death and destruction, after the complete annihilation of human resistance, the idea that these godlike destroyers could simply stop seems too incredible to believe. It's like watching a hurricane suddenly run out of puff for no apparent reason. This creeping sickness among the Martians is something utterly unexpected. You've seen their technology, their intellect, their ruthless efficiency. You assumed they were infallible, a superior species in every way. The quirky notion of them having no natural predators or diseases on Mars might have made them formidable there. But Earth is a different ballpark. Your despair had been so total, so all-encompassing, that the prospect of any change for the better felt impossible. But the evidence before your eyes, though subtle at first, is becoming undeniable. The giants are stumbling. The titans are tiring. The silence from their direction is no longer just the silence of confident occupation, but something weaker. You watch, and you wait, a fragile, almost forgotten seed of hope beginning to germinate in the desolate landscape of your heart. The end, whatever it may be, is drawing near. The tentative hope that flickered within you on Primrose Hill grows stronger as you continue to observe the baffling decline of the Martian invaders. It's not a sudden collapse, but a creeping, insidious sickness that seems to be claiming them one by one. Remember the utter invincibility they displayed? The heat rays that decimated towns? The black smoke that choked the life out of everything? Now, that terrifying power is visibly waning. You venture closer to one of the Martian encampments, perhaps near their great earthworks on the north side of London, driven by a morbid curiosity and the dawning, almost unbelievable realization that the tide might actually be turning. The redweed still flourishes, a vibrant alien crimson, but the creators of this strange new world are dying amidst their triumph. You see tripods standing motionless, unattended, like colossal statues slowly succumbing to rust and neglect. Handling machines lie inert, their metallic tentacles curled in strange, unnatural positions. And then you see them, the Martians themselves, lying dead or dying outside their machines. Their leathery skin, once glistening and vital, is now dull and dry. Their great luminous eyes are clouded and dim. They are succumbing not to human weapons, but to something far more ancient and insidious. Disease, bacteria, the smallest, simplest organisms on Earth, the ones humanity has lived alongside and often struggled against for millennia, are proving to be the Martians' undoing. It's an almost comical, cosmic irony. They conquered a planet, only to be felled by its germs. Talk about a bad case of traveler's tummy, times a billion. The air, once filled with their eerie "Ulla, ulla" cries, is now punctuated by the raucous cawing of crows and rooks gathering to feast on the remains of the fallen invaders. These birds, so common and familiar, are picking apart the bodies of beings that were, just days ago, masters of the world. Nature, in its relentless, unsentimental way, is reclaiming its own. The realization dawns fully. Humanity has been saved, not by its armies, not by its science, though your brother, the medical student, would later appreciate the biological intricacies, but by the unseen, unthanked, and utterly microscopic inhabitants of Earth. It's a humbling, almost unbelievable salvation. For all their advanced technology, their intellect, their devastating weaponry, the Martians had no immunity to Earth's common microbes. They had evolved in a sterile Martian environment, or one with an entirely different microbial ecology. Earth, with its teeming complex biome, was a biological death trap for them. Wells's choice of denouement is genius. It sidesteps the need for a contrived human victory and instead delivers a powerful message about the interconnectedness of life and the unforeseen consequences that can arise even from technological superiority. Historians still argue whether this ending was a deliberate commentary on the vulnerability of imperial powers, even alien ones, to local conditions, or simply a scientifically plausible, for the time, way to resolve an otherwise overwhelming alien threat. The 1892 cholera pandemic in Hamburg, where the city's water supply was contaminated, causing thousands of deaths, was a stark contemporary reminder of how deadly invisible microbes could be, even to advanced human societies. You walk through the silent, lifeless Martian pits. The great cylinders are now just hulks of strange metal. The complex machinery stands abandoned. The once feared handling machines are scrap. It's an almost eerie experience, like walking through the graveyard of a god. You touch the cold, alien metal, the stuff of nightmares, now rendered harmless. And slowly, cautiously, other human survivors begin to emerge. Gaunt, hollow-eyed figures, blinking in the unaccustomed daylight of a world without immediate, active Martian predation. There are tearful reunions, incredulous questions, and a dazed, shared sense of disbelief. Is it truly over? Can it be? The trauma is still fresh, the loss is immense, but there's a palpable sense of relief, so profound it's almost painful. The quirky, often forgotten detail is the sheer stench that must have accompanied the Martians' demise on such a large scale. Wells mentions the gathering birds, but the decomposition of so many large alien bodies would have created an olfactory experience quite unlike any other. Not something you'd want to bottle as a souvenir. The world begins to reawaken, slowly, painfully. The red weed, though still present, begins to wither and die in some areas, lacking the Martians' active cultivation or perhaps succumbing to earthly blights itself. The rivers, though still choked in places, start to clear. The sounds of human activity, tentative at first, begin to return. A distant hammer, a snatch of song, the creak of a cart. You make your way back towards your own home, or what's left of it. The journey is a reverse of the panicked flight, but imbued with a fragile hope instead of terror. The landscape is scarred, traumatized, but the alien menace has passed. You reflect on the sheer dumb luck of it all. Humanity, proud and technologically advancing, was brought to its knees only to be saved by the very lowest forms of life on the planet. There is work to be done, immense work, rebuilding, mourning, trying to make sense of the cataclysm. But for now, there is simply the incredible life-affirming fact of survival. The sky is quiet, the hum of alien machinery is gone. The Earth, bruised and battered, still belongs to humanity. The War of the Worlds is over. Not with a bang, but with the whimper of a dying alien and the triumphant unseen work of terrestrial bacteria. The immediate raw relief of the Martians' sudden demise slowly gives way to a more complex and enduring aftermath. You find your way back to your own small corner of Surrey, to Woking, the place where this cosmic nightmare began with a falling star and an unscrewing cylinder. Remember the initial curiosity on Horsell Common, the unsuspecting crowd? The contrast with the present desolation is a wound that will take a long time to heal. Your house, if it's still standing, is likely damaged, looted, or overgrown with the remnants of the red weed. The familiar landmarks are scarred, some perhaps gone forever. The world you return to is irrevocably changed. It's not just the physical destruction, the ruined towns and the altered landscapes. It's the psychological impact, the shattering of humanity's complacent belief in its own supremacy. For centuries, man had considered himself the undisputed master of his domain. Now, you know otherwise. You have looked into the cold, intelligent eyes of a superior predator, and you have seen your species relegated to the status of mere cattle. That knowledge is a shadow that will linger long after the last Martian tripod has rusted into dust. You reunite with your brother, an emotional encounter, a small beacon of personal solace amidst the widespread grief and confusion. He, like you, bears the invisible scars of his ordeal. The flight from London, the terror on the seas, the sight of a civilization collapsing. You share your stories, piecing together the fragmented narrative of the invasion from your different perspectives. It's a process mirrored across the recovering land as survivors try to make sense of the catastrophe. The recovery is slow, arduous. Society has to be rebuilt from the ground up. Governments, or what's left of them, struggle to restore order, to organize relief efforts, to count the dead, and to deal with the vast swaths of uninhabitable land still choked by the dying red weed. The economic impact is devastating. The intricate web of commerce, industry, and agriculture has been torn apart. It's a grim joke that property values in the home counties probably took a rather significant hit. Who wants a charming cottage with previous Martian abattoir views? One of the most significant long-term consequences is the sudden, intense interest in astronomy and the possibility of extraterrestrial life. Mars, once a subject of idle speculation for most, is now viewed with a mixture of fear and intense scientific curiosity. Humanity has been given a stark warning. We are not alone, and the universe is not necessarily a benign place. This galvanizes scientific inquiry, a desperate need to understand, to prepare, lest another, perhaps even more formidable threat emerges from the void. The Martian technology, though now inert, is a subject of immense study. Salvaged pieces of their machines, their strange alloys, the remnants of their heat ray projectors and black smoke canisters are pored over by scientists. There's a morbid fascination mixed with a pragmatic desire to learn, to reverse engineer, to arm humanity against future incursions. Historians still argue whether this rapid technological looting, if it occurred on a large scale as implied, might have actually spurred human innovation in unintended ways, accelerating certain fields of science and engineering, much like real-world wartime technological advances. A peculiar tidbit often discussed is what happened to the bodies of the Martians themselves. Were they all left to decay, or were some preserved for study? Wells doesn't dwell on it, but one can imagine the ghoulish, yet scientifically vital dissections that must have taken place as human anatomists and biologists tried to understand these utterly alien beings who had briefly held Earth in their tentacled grip. The direct blood transfusion feeding method would have been a particularly gruesome and fascinating area of study. There's a philosophical shift, too. The comfortable Victorian certainties about progress, empire, and humanity's ordained place in the cosmos have been profoundly shaken. A new humility, a new sense of cosmic perspective begins to take root. Man is just one species among many, on one small planet in a vast and potentially hostile universe. This realization, terrifying as it was in its delivery, could ultimately be a catalyst for a more mature, less anthropocentric worldview. You try to return to some semblance of normal life, but normal has been redefined. The skies are scanned with a new anxiety. Strange lights or unusual weather phenomena spark rumors and momentary panics. The memory of the tripods, of the heat ray, of the suffocating red weed is burned into the collective consciousness. You might find yourself waking in the night, the phantom hoot of "Ula, ula" echoing in your ears, the coppery scent of the red weed a ghost on the breeze. Life continues as it always does. People rebuild, replant, remarry. Children are born who will know of the Martian invasion only as a terrible story, a historical event. But for those who live through it, like you, the world will never quite be the same. The Earth has been scarred, but so has the human psyche. You carry the knowledge that humanity's dominion is fragile, its existence contingent. And as you look up at the ruddy light of Mars in the night sky, it is no longer just a celestial curiosity. It is a reminder, a warning. The Martians were defeated not by human might, but by the smallest of Earth's creatures, by the planet's own defense mechanisms. But they were a vast, intelligent, and resourceful species, and somewhere out there, perhaps, they are learning, adapting, remembering. The future, once a comforting progression, now holds a faint but persistent echo of unease. The quiet that settles over your small part of the world, in the slow-fading light, is different now. It's a quiet earned through unimaginable terror and unforeseen salvation, a quiet that carries the weight of all that was lost and all that was, almost miraculously, retained. You might sit on your porch, if you still have one, watching the stars come out one by one. That old sense of peace, of the heavens being merely a beautiful distant backdrop, is gone forever. Now, as you look up, you can't help but wonder what else might be looking back, and what lessons they, and we, have truly learned from the War of the Worlds. The wind whispers through the recovering trees, carrying the scent of damp earth and new growth, slowly erasing the last coppery traces of the alien flora. The deep, profound silence of a world healing itself envelops you, and the shadows lengthen, inviting a rest that has been long and desperately sought. Your eyelids grow heavy. The memories, though sharp, begin to soften around the edges, like watercolors left in the gentle rain. The extraordinary horror has passed, integrated into the fabric of a changed existence, and the ordinary quiet pulse of life, though forever altered, reasserts its steady, calming rhythm. Let the quiet sounds of the evening be a balm, a reassurance that even after the greatest of storms, peace can and does return. Drift now into that well-deserved slumber, knowing that the greatest battles are sometimes won in the smallest, most unexpected ways, and that the world, despite its scars, continues to turn, cradling you gently in the vast, silent dark.